Listen closely, my friends. There comes a moment when you have to ask yourself a painful question. How much of yourself have you been willing to lose just to keep someone else? Maybe you stopped saying what you really felt because you were afraid they would leave. Maybe you accepted treatment you knew you didn't deserve because you were afraid of being alone. Maybe you kept apologizing even when you weren't wrong. Maybe you kept giving and giving and giving, while secretly hoping that one day they would finally give you the love you were giving them. And perhaps the hardest part is this. You told yourself it was love. You called it patience. You called it loyalty. You called it understanding. You told yourself that relationships require sacrifice, and sometimes they do. But there is a difference between sacrificing for someone and sacrificing yourself to keep someone. One comes from love, the other comes from fear, and if you have to become smaller, quieter, more agreeable, more convenient, or less honest just to make someone stay, you are no longer simply loving them, you are abandoning yourself. The Stoics understood something that can completely change the way you see relationships. They believed that the most important thing you possess is not another person's affection. It is your character, your judgment, your principles, your ability to live according to what you know is right. Because when you give another person control over those things, you give them something no human being should own, the authority to decide who you become. And that's what we're going to explore today. 7 Stoic principles for stopping the habit of abandoning yourself just to be loved. Because the goal isn't to become cold, it isn't to stop caring, it isn't to stop loving deeply. The goal is to learn how to love someone without leaving yourself behind. And the first lesson begins with a mistake that almost everyone makes when they're afraid of losing someone. Lesson 1. Stop begging to be chosen. There is a moment when love quietly becomes a competition. You start wondering, how can I make them choose me? How can I become more attractive, more useful, more understanding, more patient, more available, more forgiving, more whatever they seem to want? And without realizing it, you stop asking the more important question, do I choose them? That's the question people often forget. They become so focused on being wanted that they forget to examine whether the person wanting them is actually good for them. Imagine standing outside a locked door. You knock. Nothing. You knock again. Still nothing. So you begin changing yourself. Maybe they'll open if you become quieter. Maybe they'll open if you apologize. Maybe they'll open if you give them more. Maybe they'll open if you prove that you're worth letting in. So you keep knocking. Hours, days, months, and eventually you're exhausted. But you still think the problem is that you haven't knocked hard enough. What if the problem isn't you? What if the door simply isn't yours to enter? The Stoics repeatedly returned to the distinction between what belongs to us and what does not. Another person's affection is not fully under your control. Their feelings aren't yours to command. Their commitment isn't yours to force. Their decision to stay isn't yours to guarantee. You can love someone. You can communicate honestly. You can show up. You can be loyal. You can become a better partner. But you cannot manufacture another person's willingness to love you. And the moment you understand that, something changes. You stop performing. You stop auditioning. You stop trying to convince someone that you're worthy of basic affection. You begin asking, are we actually good for each other? Do their actions match their words? Can I be myself around them? Do I feel respected? Can we disagree without destroying each other? Does this relationship allow both of us to remain whole? Those questions require courage, because sometimes the answer will be painful. Sometimes you discover that you have been fighting desperately to preserve something that was never giving you peace. The Stoic does not say, I must be chosen. The Stoic says, I will act according to my values, and I will accept what is outside my control. That is freedom. You don't have to convince someone to stay. You have to decide what kind of treatment you are willing to stay for. So stop measuring your worth by who chooses you. Choose yourself first, not selfishly, not arrogantly, but with enough self-respect to understand that love should not require you to beg for your own place in someone's life. And once you stop begging to be chosen, you face the next temptation. You may start changing your values just to keep the person who finally chose you. And that is where the second lesson begins. Lesson 2. Never trade your values for affection. One of the most dangerous bargains in life sounds harmless. I'll just let this one thing go. One lie. One broken promise. One boundary crossed. One insult. One behavior you promised yourself you would never accept. You tell yourself, it's not worth fighting about. I don't want to lose them. They're under a lot of pressure. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. So you let it go. Then it happens again. And again. And eventually, the thing you once considered unacceptable becomes normal. This is how self-abandonment happens. Usually not in one dramatic decision. It happens through small compromises, a little less honesty, a little less self-respect, a little more pretending, until one day you look at yourself and realize, I don't recognize the person I've become just to keep this relationship alive. The Stoics placed enormous value on character because they understood that external things can be taken away. Money can disappear. Status can disappear. Relationships can change. People can leave. But your character is something you are responsible for developing and protecting. Imagine you own a house. You allow someone inside because you love them. At first, they move one chair, then another. Then they decide which rooms they can enter. Then they begin throwing away your belongings. Then they tell you how you should decorate the house. Eventually, you realize something. You are still technically living there, but it no longer feels like your home. That's what happens when you continuously surrender your principles for affection. Your life becomes organized around someone else's preferences. You stop asking, what do I believe? And start asking, what will keep them happy with me? Those are very different questions. Healthy love can require compromise. Of course it can. You won't always get your way. You will sometimes apologize. You will sometimes change. You will sometimes put someone else's needs ahead of your own. But there is a line. Compromise changes how you live together. Self-abandonment changes who you are allowed to be. Never confuse the two. If being loved requires you to lie, betray your principles, accept constant disrespect, or become someone you don't recognize, the price is too high. You can love someone and still say no. You can love someone and still have boundaries. You can love someone and still walk away. You can love someone and refuse to participate in something that violates your principles. That isn't a failure of love. That is loyalty to your character. And without loyalty to yourself, eventually there will be very little left for anyone else to love. But perhaps the hardest part comes next. Because sometimes we know someone is treating us badly, and we stay anyway. We call it patience. We call it forgiveness. We call it love. But sometimes it's something else. Lesson 3. Stop confusing tolerance with love. Have you ever tolerated something for so long that you forgot it was hurting you? You knew the conversation wasn't healthy. You knew the disrespect wasn't normal. You knew the relationship was draining you. But every time you thought about leaving, fear arrived. What if I regret it? What if they change? What if nobody else loves me? What if I'm alone? So you stay, and you tell yourself, love requires patience. Yes, sometimes it does. But patience and self-destruction are not the same thing. Forgiveness and permission are not the same thing. Understanding someone's pain does not require you to volunteer for their mistreatment. Imagine someone keeps stepping on your foot. The first time, you might say, they didn't mean to. The second time, maybe they didn't notice. The third time, they're having a difficult day. But eventually, you have to move your foot. Not because you hate them, Because you finally understand that compassion doesn't require you to remain in the position where you're continually being hurt. The Stoic approach is not endure everything. It's distinguish what is worthy of endurance from what requires action. Some hardships should be endured. Growth is uncomfortable. Relationships require patience. People make mistakes. But repeated disrespect is information. Repeated betrayal is information. Repeated manipulation is information. Repeated disregard for your boundaries is information. Don't keep waiting for someone's potential while ignoring their pattern. A person may have good intentions. They may have suffered. They may have reasons for behaving the way they do. Understanding those reasons can make you compassionate, but it doesn't make you obligated to stay. This is where Stoicism becomes incredibly practical. You don't need to hate the person. You don't need revenge. You don't need to prove they were wrong. You simply need to recognize reality, and then make the decision that protects your character and your peace. Sometimes love means staying and working through something. Sometimes love means creating a boundary. Sometimes love means leaving. The difficult part is accepting that all three can come from love. So ask yourself, am I staying because this relationship is healthy, or am I staying because I'm terrified of what happens if it ends? Those answers can look identical from the outside, but internally they are completely different. One is commitment, the other is fear. And fear becomes even more powerful when you start believing that someone's love is proof of your worth. That's the trap behind Lesson 4. Lesson 4. Stop using someone else's love as proof of your worth. If someone loves you, does that make you valuable? No. And if someone stops loving you, does that make you worthless? Also no. But emotionally, many people live as though the answer to both questions is yes. They feel amazing when someone wants them. They feel invisible when someone withdraws. They measure their beauty by attention, their worth by messages, their importance by how quickly someone responds, their identity by whether someone chooses them. That is a dangerous way to live. Because you have handed the measurement of your worth to someone whose feelings can change, and now your emotional stability depends on something you cannot control. Imagine giving someone else the remote control to your television. They can change the channel whenever they want. Happy, sad, confident, anxious, valuable, worthless, loved, rejected. They press a button, and suddenly your entire emotional state changes. Why would you give another person that kind of power? The Stoics understood that external approval is unstable. People praise you today and criticize you tomorrow. They admire you when you succeed. They disappear when you struggle. They may love one version of you and dislike another. If your identity depends on their approval, you will spend your life adjusting yourself to whoever is standing in front of you. Instead, build an internal standard. Ask, did I act with integrity? Did I tell the truth? Did I keep my word? Did I treat people fairly? Did I behave according to the person I want to become? Those questions matter more than, do they still like me? Of course, being loved feels wonderful. Human beings are built for connection. There's nothing wrong with wanting affection. The problem begins when affection becomes your evidence that you deserve to exist. You don't need to earn your right to respect yourself. And once you understand that, rejection becomes different. It can still hurt, but it doesn't destroy your identity. Someone can say, I don't want this relationship, and you can hear, this relationship isn't right for me, without hearing, I am not enough. Those are not the same sentence. Never turn another person's preference into a verdict about your worth. Their choice belongs to them. Your character belongs to you. And this distinction becomes even more important when someone misunderstands you. Which brings us to Lesson 5. Lesson 5. Stop shrinking yourself to be easier to love. Have you ever edited yourself for someone? You stopped talking about certain things. You hid your ambitions. You pretended not to care. You became less expressive. You stopped asking for what you needed. You laughed when something hurt. You said, "It's fine," when it wasn't. Maybe you thought you were making the relationship easier, but slowly you were becoming invisible inside it. There is a difference between becoming a better person and becoming a smaller person. Growth asks you to remove arrogance, selfishness, impatience, and destructive habits. Self-abandonment asks you to remove your voice, your needs, your boundaries, your personality, and your principles. One makes you stronger, the other makes you disappear. Think about a plant. If you constantly bend it because you don't like the direction it's growing, eventually you may create the shape you want, but you may also damage the plant. People do this to themselves in relationships. They keep bending, not because they want to, because they're terrified that standing upright will make someone leave. But here's the painful truth. If someone only loves the version of you that has no boundaries, they may not be loving you. They may be loving the convenience of having access to you. You should be able to say, "I don't agree. I need space. That hurt me. I don't want this. I need more. I can't accept that," and still know that you are worthy of love. The Stoics didn't teach people to become socially pleasing. They taught people to become internally consistent, to live according to reason, to act according to virtue, to stop allowing external approval to dictate internal character. That means your life cannot become a performance designed to satisfy everyone around you. You don't need to become difficult. You don't need to become selfish. You don't need to reject compromise. But you do need to remain recognizable to yourself. Because imagine reaching the end of a relationship and realizing, "I spent years trying to be loved by this person and forgot to live." That is a much deeper loss than a breakup. So don't shrink yourself to fit into someone's idea of what makes you lovable. Become better, become wiser, become kinder, become stronger, but remain yourself. And when someone can't accept the authentic version of you, you must be willing to face what that means. Because sometimes the hardest form of self-respect is allowing someone to walk away. Lesson 6. Let people leave without abandoning yourself. This may be the most painful lesson of all. Sometimes you can do everything right and someone still leaves. You can communicate. You can apologize. You can improve. You can be loyal. You can love deeply. And they can still decide they want something different. That hurts. Of course it does. But pain does not mean you made the wrong choice. The Stoics understood that attachment to outcomes creates suffering. You can control your actions, you cannot control another person's final decision. And relationships are exactly where people often forget this. They think, if I just say the right thing, if I give them enough, if I prove how much I care, if I become exactly what they need, maybe they won't leave. But love is not a hostage negotiation. You cannot guarantee someone's presence by sacrificing enough of yourself. Imagine holding sand in your hand. The tighter you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. Sometimes the desperate attempt to prevent loss becomes the very thing that destroys your peace. Letting someone leave does not mean you don't love them. It means you recognize that love cannot be forced. You can say, "I wish you well. I wish things were different. I'm grateful for what we shared, and I accept that I cannot control your decision." That is painful strength. You don't need to turn someone into an enemy just because they stopped being your partner. You don't need to rewrite the entire relationship as meaningless. You don't need revenge. You don't need to prove that they made the biggest mistake of their life. You need to return to yourself. Because sometimes the person you need to rescue isn't the relationship. It's you. The version of you who stopped sleeping properly. The version of you who stopped pursuing your goals. The version of you who became obsessed with whether someone would stay. The version of you who forgot what life looked like before the relationship. Go find that person again. And when you do, you'll discover something important. Losing someone can hurt deeply without destroying you. Their departure can change your life without determining its value. You can grieve and still move forward. You can miss them and still choose yourself. You can love them and still let them go. That is emotional independence, and it leads to the final lesson. Because after you've stopped chasing them, stopped shrinking yourself, and stopped measuring your worth by their presence, you have to build something new, a relationship with yourself that you refuse to abandon. Lesson 7. Become someone you never abandon. This is where everything comes together. The goal was never simply to leave bad relationships. The goal was to become the kind of person who doesn't disappear inside relationships. You need to become someone you can trust, someone who keeps promises to themselves, someone who notices when something feels wrong, someone who doesn't betray their principles because they're afraid of being alone, someone who can say, "I would rather be alone than lose myself trying to keep someone." That's not bitterness. That's self-respect. And self-respect changes the way you love. You stop asking, "How do I make this person stay?" and start asking, "Can we build something healthy together?" You stop asking, "How do I become enough for them?" and start asking, "Can we both show up as ourselves?" You stop asking, "What can I tolerate to keep this relationship?" and start asking, "What kind of relationship allows both of us to remain whole?" That is a completely different way of loving, and it doesn't make you less loving, it makes your love healthier, because when you no longer need someone to complete your identity, you can actually choose them freely. You aren't saying, "I need you because I cannot survive without you." You're saying, "I value you, I love you, and I choose to share my life with you." There is enormous strength in that difference. The Stoics would remind you that everything external is temporary. People come, people leave, circumstances change, bodies age, fortunes rise and fall. Nothing external is guaranteed. So if you build your entire identity around one person's presence, you're building your peace on unstable ground. Build it somewhere stronger. Build it in your character. Build it in your principles. Build it in your ability to stand alone. Build it in your capacity to love without possessing. Build it in your ability to leave without hatred. Build it in your willingness to tell the truth, even when the truth might cost you someone's approval. Because the greatest relationship you will ever have is not the relationship where someone promises never to leave you. It is the relationship where you stop leaving yourself. Think about all the times you betrayed yourself just to keep someone. The time you said yes when you meant no. The time you stayed silent because you feared conflict. The time you accepted disrespect because you feared loneliness. The time you apologized simply because you couldn't bear the thought of them being angry. The time you abandoned your goals because someone didn't support them. The time you became someone else because you thought the real you wasn't lovable enough. Forgive yourself. You were probably trying to protect something. Maybe the relationship, maybe your family, maybe your sense of belonging, maybe your fear of being alone. You don't need to hate the old version of yourself. You need to understand them, and then teach yourself something new. You don't have to disappear to be loved. You can be kind without being a people pleaser. You can compromise without betraying yourself. You can forgive without forgetting your boundaries. You can love deeply without becoming dependent. You can care about someone without making their emotions your responsibility. You can accept rejection without rejecting yourself. You can let someone leave without leaving yourself behind. And perhaps most importantly, you can be alone without believing you are unwanted. Because solitude and rejection are not the same thing. Being alone can be a season. Being rejected can be someone else's decision. Neither one determines your worth. So the next time you find yourself changing who you are just to keep someone's affection, stop. Take a breath. Ask yourself, what am I giving away right now? My peace? My principles? My boundaries? My voice? My dignity? My goals? My identity? Then ask the question that can change everything. If I have to abandon myself to keep this person, What exactly am I keeping? Because love should ask you to grow. It should not require you to disappear. Love may require patience. It may require sacrifice. It may require compromise. But it should not require the destruction of your character. And if someone leaves because you finally established a boundary, let them leave. If someone becomes angry because you started respecting yourself, let them be angry. If someone stops loving you because you stopped being convenient, let that truth reveal itself. It may hurt, but sometimes pain is simply the price of finally refusing to betray yourself. Remember the 7 lessons. Stop begging to be chosen. You are not auditioning for the right to be loved. Never trade your values for affection. A relationship isn't worth becoming someone you cannot respect. Stop confusing tolerance with love. Understanding someone doesn't require you to accept everything they do. Stop using someone's love as proof of your worth. Their feelings can change. Your character is yours to build. Stop shrinking yourself to be easier to love. Become better, but don't become smaller. Let people leave without abandoning yourself. Their choice is outside your control. And become someone you never abandon, because that is where real self-respect begins. The world will tell you that losing someone is the greatest tragedy. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes the greatest tragedy is keeping someone and losing yourself in the process. You can survive someone's departure. You can survive their rejection. You can survive being misunderstood. You can survive being alone. But rebuilding a relationship with yourself after years of self-betrayal takes something different. It takes courage. So choose courage now. Choose honesty. Choose boundaries. Choose your principles. Choose your dignity. Choose the person you're becoming. And when love comes into your life, let it meet you there. Don't crawl toward it. Don't beg for it. Don't perform for it. Don't destroy yourself to keep it. Stand where you are, whole, honest, imperfect, human, and let the right people love you, not the smaller version of you that you created because you were afraid they would leave. If this message spoke to something you've been struggling with, like this video, subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who needs to hear this. And tell me in the comments, what is one thing you refuse to abandon about yourself again just to keep someone? Remember this, you don't need to become less to be loved. You don't need to betray yourself to keep someone. You don't need to chase someone who has already decided to walk away. And you don't need another person's affection to prove that you are worthy. The Stoics taught us to return to what is within our control. Your character is within your control. Your choices are within your control. Your boundaries are within your control. Your response is within your control. And the moment you stop handing those things to other people, you begin to become free. So love deeply, care deeply, give generously, forgive when forgiveness is deserved, but never forget the person who is supposed to be with you through every relationship, every loss, every beginning, and every ending, you. Because the greatest promise you can make isn't, "I'll never let you go," it's, "I'll never let myself go again." And once you stop abandoning yourself to be loved, you finally become capable of experiencing love without losing the one person you were supposed to protect all along, yourself.